This is the Slots and Sockets Podcast, episode number 62. I am one of your hosts, IRD Moose, and my partner in crime is...
Turbopenguin.
Happy Monday to you, Turbo. Another on-time show. Good job to us. So, over the weekend, we need to talk.
We really do, because it's, we've said this before, and I know, like, I'm sure that there are people out there who think that we that we hate Intel, because the beginning, like back late last year, like it was like episode after episode of us like ripping just Intel a new one,
slagging on them,
and then we stopped doing it because well, they just
they sort of fix things and sort of,
well, and I also
they kind of did the right thing,
sort of, and the problem is that like where we've left off with Intel, Nvidia was like quick to jump in and be like, we're next, let us do it and have some fun here.
Jensen was like, hold my leather jacket.
I mean, because if we go to the keynote, and I'll have to say, like, leaving the keynote and listening to all of the hype that came up with it was, holy crap, this is going to be the next greatest thing, and it's going to be the best thing since sliced bread.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, I remember driving home from Las Vegas after the keynote, and we were driving with Lakers, who we've had on the podcast before.
Yep.
And we were sitting there driving back and talking to you, and I made the thing that says, let's wait until we see what third-party reviews look like before we really say that this is a grand slam. But they were like, everything that they were saying was like, holy crap, this is, I mean, because let's be honest, let's take a step back. If we look at the keynote from CES, if a 5070 was the performance and price as a 4090, that would have been amazing.
Mm-hmm. It would have been a game changer.
It would have been absolutely amazing. And everything else that they said on the keynote, had it been true, would have been amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that at this point, you can't leave a word that Nvidia says anywhere, anytime about any product, because it's all lies.
Yeah.
And I've come to realize, like, I saw, a bunch of people have been saying this stuff, and all I can tell you is that it's like anything that comes out of Nvidia's mouth is a bunch of lies. And they consistently do this, and they've been doing this with the 50 series, where they want to compare current gen versus last gen, but they don't want to do it on the same settings.
Right.
They don't want to say, here's a 5060 versus a 4060 with real frames. What they're saying is that let's look at fake frames, because our new one has a multiplier on the fake frames, where instead of just doing fake frames, it does fake frames times 4.
Right.
And that's fair. That's a fair comparison, is what they think.
Oh, and it's worse than that, because some of the comparisons that they are demanding of reviewers to get reviews out today include not testing against the 4060, but testing against the 3060 and the 2060, which the 3060 has single frame gen, 2060 has 0 frame gen. The 4060 at least has double frame gen.
All I can tell you is that, and we were talking about this, and this worries me more than anything else, more than just like what Nvidia is doing.
Yeah,
is that you're starting to see how this is going to go when you don't have third parties who are doing legitimate reviews where you're going to start to look in the footnotes to see if somebody has, is it real frames versus fake frames, and which version of fake frames is it?
Yep.
Because you're going to have DLSS version 77, and oh well, that card only supports version 50, and so the 77 is 30% quicker because of whatever it is. Guys, when you're looking at reviews for video cards, it's really simple. Don't look at anyone who is giving you any form of reviews where they have DLSS versus like 3 versus 4.
Yep.
Unless this is a review of saying how much better DLSS version 3 to version 4 is, there is zero benefit from comparing of DLSS 4 on a 50 series to DLSS 3 on a 40 series.
Right.
Because the notion is that at this price point, if you're having to turn on DLSS or FSR to get a target resolution, then you're buying a card that's not fast enough out of the box.
Yep.
You should be using DLSS and multi-frame gen 3 or 4 years down the road to try to get your card's performance to last another generation or two.
Yep.
Or if you're in the budget to say, I bought 2 generations old, this allows me to get me through a couple of years to where I can play and get something newer. But it's really simple. The only thing that we should be looking at in reviews is real frame to real frame.
Yep.
Because what we're not realizing is whether you're on AMD fluid motion frames or you are on multi-frame gen, okay, at the end of the day, it's based off of the base frame rate that your card can generate. So if your card generates 5 frames a second, your fluid motion or your multi-frame gen is based off of, and your gameplay is going to play like it's 5 frames a second. And I will tell you, if you can only get 5 frames a second on your base graphics card, frame gen isn't going to help you. Now, if your base frame rate is 75 or 85 frames a second, and you're trying to smooth out, then there's a benefit to doing that. But that's assuming that your base frame rate is high enough that it's going to feel like like 80 or 85 or 75 on the base, and help to level off so you don't have these crazy dips. But that's the use case. When you're getting 30 frames a second, let me help you. You need to lower your resolution and lower your quality settings, because FSR isn't going to fix 5 frames a second. It's not fixing 15 or 20. For these cards, this is the concern that we have with this technology, is that you're going to have people saying, well, I'm pulling 90 frames a second. Okay, so divide that by 4. So does that mean you're getting 15 frames a second? Does that mean you're getting 23 frames a second? And then I would make the argument, if you're getting only 20 or 30 or 15 frames a second, that's still going to be crappy gameplay.
Yeah.
It's still going to feel that way, even though your little counter at the top of your screen says 90.
It's got a big number. Yeah. Well, I mean, 30 frames a second for a single player non-racing sim game, like an arcade racer or most single player shooters, which granted aren't very many these days, would be acceptable for a base frame rate. But you start getting much below that, and yeah, you're having issues aiming, hitting targets, things like that. Ideally, like you said, you want your base frame rate to be as high as possible. Now, one of the other use cases, which is actually what I use fluid motion frames and FSR for in my case, is my 7900 XTX. In fact, my 6900 XT also put out a great deal of heat running wild, playing things like Fortnite and playing, whatever. Like another good example is Schedule One, where in some instances of the game I'm getting over 300 frames a second. Well, you turn on fluid motion frames, you turn on frame gen, and you set the cap for the base frame rate down around 60, and it doesn't change your experience. You just get similar frame rates with less heat, which I'm all for because, I mean, air conditioning is expensive enough as it is in California. I mean, good grief.
I mean,
You know,
I just, I'm sure that for some people, like they'll have a use case for this,
sure.
but let's be honest, you know, this is something that, and I sort of feel like what we're seeing from both Nvidia and to some extent AMD following the path for this is a way to increase your frames and saying, well, we have higher frames. Guys, chasing a higher number, if that means your card is actually faster, is
Mhm.
not a bad thing.
Right.
But I'd make the argument that if all we're doing is dumbing down our quality to get to a faster frame, I have a really easy way of fixing that for you. Lower your resolution, because that's all that this is doing. This is all it's doing is lowering your resolution. It's lowering your fidelity.
Yeah.
So you know what? Get a screen that's smaller or go to a lower resolution. And if you do a 1080p, 22-inch, monitor, it's going to look pretty decent.
Hmm. Well,
And at
heck, I mean,
1080p, you can go a heck of a lot faster when you're not doing 4K.
a 1080p 1080p on a 4K display, if your display handles it properly, generally looks good because that's a 1:4 scaling. So at 1080p, if you're playing on a 4K display, instead of one 1080p pixel being 1 pixel, it's 4. Um,
I mean,
and
I mean,
that generally looks okay because you're scaling it 1:4. It's an even multiple, but it's
but
you're
there's
right.
monitors out there that have dual native res.
Hmm.
So Alienware and HP, by the way, have a dual res monitor
Hmm.
where it is native at 1080p
Yep.
and native at 4K.
Right.
That's probably the thing that you should be getting.
Right. And a lot of times those monitors will support other very helpful features like, uh, wow, I'm drawing a blank. Uh, what's the frame rate feature where the display matches on Nvidia? What's it called?
G-Sync.
G-Sync, yes, or FreeSync on the AMD. I can't believe I locked up on that. Good grief, must be one of those days. Um, G-Sync and FreeSync are usually supported on those monitors. I mean, pretty much any monitor you get these days, unless you're really trying to go bottom of the barrel, is going to have at the very least FreeSync, if not FreeSync Premium. Most 4K TVs will include FreeSync as well. So, you get to take advantage of features like that, but also get the display handling and scaling quite nicely. I mean, 1080p content on my 4K TV, it's a 55-inch, and sitting on my recliner over here, when I kick back and play something at 1080p that doesn't necessarily work at 4K, it looks just fine. So, yeah, maybe you do get a 4K display and you just muddle along with a lower end GPU, but you run it at something that's an even multiple than native res. It even looks good playing 1440p stuff. So, um, don't get a 5060 expecting it's going to play games particularly well because it's not. Don't
Yeah.
ex- and that's the thing is like I haven't had a 5060 in my hands and I don't plan on it because I'm not going to support Nvidia in their anti-consumer behavior, their anti-review behavior, because they're going around and trying to dictate what reviews get published. And so I want to put this warning out there that if you see any day one reviews on a 5060, which there are some out there, look at it with a jaundiced eye because they are doing some shenanigans to get those cards from Nvidia and
I
from
hope
board partners.
I hope that reviewers just push to say these are real frames and call out fake frames when they're used.
No,
But
and I don't mind comparing fake frames to fake frames, but you know, if you're going to compare 4060 versus a 5060 running DLSS 3 versus DLSS 4, give me the vanilla frame count as well, because I want to know what those cards can do, and that will help me decide if the 5060 is worth getting, if the base rate is better enough than the 4060 that I'll get an actually playable DLSS experience in the games I play. And that's where I'm okay with fake frames. What I'm not okay with is using them to claim performance metrics, because that's not what those are for doing. It's fake frames now, the DLSS multi-frame gen and fluid motion frames and, you know, whatever, I think Intel's is XESS. Those frame generation technologies are good. They're nice. They do interesting things. But to lie and say that you're getting 4090 performance in a 5070 because you're generating 3/4 of your frames is unconscionable. And then to continue to carry that lie forward and try to force reviewers to be your mouthpiece just to have access to the golden goose that is Nvidia is wrong. And we as consumers need to make our voices heard by doing what Turbopenguin and I both did. Get Nvidia out of your life. I'm still working on it. Right now, out of the 6 machines that I own, not counting my work computer because that has an Nvidia GPU and I didn't have a choice, out of the 6 PCs that I own in this house, 2 of them still have Nvidia GPUs. And that's not going to be something I replace with another Nvidia GPU in the future. So, yeah, I think on that note, we're going to have to let Turbopenguin go because he has an emergent situation. And we will carry this discussion on next time.
Thursday.
Yeah. So
we'll make some more of this on Thursday because I know this is a moving topic.
It is.
I really hope the 5060 doesn't sell. But I don't know. We'll see. I mean, the 5070 didn't sell and still isn't selling.
Yeah.
So
I have a feeling the 5060 will be the same.
But I would really, really hope that the 5070 Ti and the 5080 stop selling. And we're starting to see that too. But
well, yeah, I wouldn't buy a 5080 until it's $799. So until next time, everybody, thank you for watching. Remember to do all the YouTube-y stuff down the doobly-doo. We're going to cut it short here. Have fun, guys. Storming the castle.
Good night.
Good night.